He insulted a Soviet general, nearly sparking WWII. May 1945. The war in Europe was over. The guns were silent. Hitler was dead. The Nazi regime had collapsed. In Berlin and along the Elbe River, American and Russian soldiers were hugging, dancing, and drinking vodka and whiskey together. The world was celebrating. But in the middle of this joy, one man wasn't smiling. General George S. Patton. While politicians in Washington and London cheered their Soviet allies, Patton watched them with cold, suspicious eyes. He didn't see allies. He saw the next enemy. He famously said, "We have defeated the wrong enemy." And nowhere was this tension more obvious than at a victory banquet hosted by the Russians. It was a lavish affair. Generals from both sides were there, medals gleaming on their chests. Tables piled high with caviar, bottles of vodka everywhere. The mood was festive until a Russian general stood up. He raised his glass, looked at Patton, and proposed a toast. It was meant to be a moment of friendship, a moment of peace. But Patton didn't drink. Instead, he stood up, looked the Russian general in the eye, and delivered an insult so shocking, so brutal, the translator feared repeating it. This is the story of that toast. It's how Patton predicted the Cold War before anyone else, and how his hatred for the Soviets nearly sparked World War III. To understand the insult, we must understand what was happening in 1945. For 4 years, America and Russia had fought on the same side. But they were never friends. Just partners of convenience. They shared a common enemy, Nazi Germany. But as the German army collapsed, the American army from the West and the Red Army from the East finally met. The meeting point was the Elbe River. On the surface, it was a happy reunion, but underneath, it was tense. Patton commanded the Third Army, the most powerful fighting force the world had ever seen. He had raced across Germany. He wanted to keep going. He wanted to take Berlin. He wanted to take Prague. But General Eisenhower ordered him to stop. "Halt," Eisenhower said. "Let the Russians take Berlin. Let the Russians take Prague." Patton was furious. He argued with Eisenhower. "Why are we stopping?" He shouted. "We are handing Europe over to the communists." Patton saw what the Red Army was doing. They weren't just liberating countries, they were conquering them. Everywhere Soviet tanks went, they stayed. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. Patton wrote in his diary, "The Russians are Mongols. They are savages. They have no respect for human life." He wasn't just being difficult, he was afraid. He believed if the American army went home, the Russians would keep marching all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. So, when Patton was invited to meet the Russian commanders, he didn't go to celebrate. He went to inspect the enemy. The most famous meeting happened near Linz. Patton met Marshal Fyodor Tolbukhin. Tolbukhin was a hero of the Soviet Union. He commanded the Third Ukrainian Front. The Russians wanted to impress Patton. They organized a massive parade. Thousands of Soviet soldiers marched past. Tanks, artillery, Cossacks riding horses. Patton watched them. His face was unreadable. Later, he told his staff what he really thought. "They are the shabbiest bunch of sons of bitches I ever saw." He criticized their uniforms. He criticized their discipline. He called them a mob. But he also respected their toughness. He knew they were dangerous. He told his officers, "I can beat them, but I have to do it now before they get stronger." After the parade came lunch. The Russians loved to drink. Toasts were a huge part of their culture. You toast to Stalin. You toast to Roosevelt. You toast to the army. And with every toast, you drink a shot of vodka. Patton hated vodka, he preferred whiskey. But he played along for a while. The atmosphere was thick with fake politeness. The Russian generals were smiling, but their eyes were cold. They knew Patton hated them, and Patton knew they hated him. They were like two wolves circling each other, waiting for the first bite. Before we get to the moment Patton nearly started a new war, take a second to subscribe to this channel. History books often leave out the ugly details, but here we tell you the unfiltered truth about the men who shaped our world. Click subscribe now so you never miss a story. Then came the moment. It was at a similar gathering. A high-ranking Russian general. Some sources say it was Sukhov. Others say it was a corps commander. But the rank didn't matter. The message did. The Russian general stood up. He held his glass high. The room went quiet. He spoke through an interpreter. He offered a toast to the solidarity of the Allied nations. He looked directly at Patton. He smiled. He waited for Patton to drink. Everyone was looking at George Patton, the supreme commander of the Third Army. Eisenhower was watching. The press was watching. Patton stood up. He didn't pick up his glass. He looked at the Russian general. His face was hard as stone. He spoke clearly, so everyone could hear. He said, "I will not drink with you." The room gasped. The translator froze. Refusing a toast in Russian culture is a grave insult. It's like slapping a man in the face. But Patton wasn't finished. He continued, "I will not drink with you or any other Russian. Son of a bitch." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. The American officers were terrified. This could cause a diplomatic incident. This could start a war. The translator looked at Patton. His face was pale. He whispered, "General, I cannot tell him that." Patton leaned in. He glared at the translator. "You tell him," Patton growled. "Tell him exactly what I said, word for word." The translator, shaking with fear, turned to the Russian general. He translated the insult. "General Patton says, he will not drink with you because you are a son of a bitch." The Americans held their breath. They waited for the Russian general to reach for his gun. They waited for an explosion. But then something strange happened. The Russian general looked at Patton. He looked at the interpreter. And then he started to laugh. He didn't get angry. He laughed. He slammed his hand on the table. He looked at Patton with a strange kind of respect. He replied, "Tell General Patton that I think he is a son of a bitch, too." Patton listened to the translation. A small smile appeared on his lips. The tension broke. Patton picked up his glass. He said, "All right, now that we understand each other, I will drink to that." They drank. One son of a bitch to another. The story of the toast became legendary. Soldiers laughed about it. Did you hear what old Blood and Guts called the commie? But for Patton, it wasn't a joke. It was a warning. In the weeks that followed, Patton became more and more vocal. He started telling anyone who would listen, "We need to fight them now." He proposed a plan. He wanted to rearm the German soldiers who had surrendered. He wanted to combine the American Third Army with the remains of the German Wehrmacht and attack the Red Army, drive them out of Eastern Europe, push them back to Moscow. He told his staff, "We're gonna have to fight them sooner or later. Why not do it now while our army is intact and we can kick their hind end back into Russia?" He wrote to his wife, "I believe that by taking a strong stand, we can save the world from a tyranny worse than Hitler." But nobody listened. The world was tired of war. The American public wanted their sons to come home. The politicians wanted peace. Eisenhower was horrified by Patton's suggestions. He thought Patton was crazy. George, stop talking like that, Eisenhower warned him. The Russians are our allies. Patton shook his head. He told Eisenhower, Ike, I hate to say this, but if you don't fight them now, you will be fighting them for the next 50 years, and you will lose far more lives. Because of his big mouth and his refusal to be polite to the Russians, Patton was dangerous. The press turned against him. They called him a warmonger. They said he was mentally unstable. Eventually, Eisenhower had no choice. He relieved Patton of his command. He took away the Third Army, the army Patton loved more than his own life. Patton was sent to a desk job. Paper shuffling, he called it. It broke his heart. He felt like a prophet who was being punished for telling the truth. He watched as the Iron Curtain fell across Europe, just as he predicted. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, all swallowed by the Soviet Union. Months later, in December 1945, Patton would die in that mysterious car crash. But his words at that dinner party echoed for decades. Today, historians look back at that moment, and they ask a difficult question. Was Patton right? If the Allies had listened to him, if they had stood up to Stalin in 1945, could the Cold War have been avoided? Could the Korean War, the Vietnam War, be prevented? We will never know. War is terrible, and Patton's plan to fight another war immediately was madness to many. But that toast, that moment of brutal honesty, reveals the essence of the man. George S. Patton didn't care about diplomacy. He didn't care about feelings. He saw the world in black and white, friends and enemies. And when a Russian general tried to act like a friend, Patton refused to lie. He looked him in the eye and told him exactly what he was. In a world of politicians and spies, Patton was a warrior, and warriors don't drink with the enemy, even at a victory party. If you believe history needs more men like General Patton,